Okay, morning everyone. Thank you very much for selecting this session to be attended and to listen to what we have to talk about. Myself, I'm Kunal Pradhan. I head the cybersecurity practice within TCS, part of our business transformation group. So more of how do we transform the cybersecurity for our customers. That's the kind of objective agenda we drive with our customers. Today, we'll talk about how do we rethink the cyber resilience strategy to address the emerging threats. We are all encountering emerging threats. We've seen how the threats, risks have evolved over the years. So we'll take a look at how the threats have been evolving, what are the kind of challenges customers are facing, why is that growing so enormously, and then what do we have to do about it, right? What do we propose to our customers? What do we drive the principles, objectives around redefining and rethinking the cyber resilience? So if you really look at the imperatives to rethink cyber resilience, why does cyber resilience need to be discussed and thought as a topic? It's because of certain factors that we have seen evolving, right? So the transformation in cybersecurity is happening at a rapid pace. We are seeing business transforming rapidly over the last couple of years. There are advanced threats, emerging threats that are evolving and coming all the times. And the reason for this are some of these things that we have listed around, right? The remote workforce. In the past 3-4 years, we have seen a lot of increase in the remote workforce, especially during the COVID times when almost 80-90% of the people are working remotely. They are getting targeted very often through phishing attacks. We saw in the plenary sessions what role phishing plays in proliferating all these attacks. And these remote workers are continuously targeted by attackers. There are higher number of connected devices. I think the sheer number of devices that we use today, and they connect to the internet, they connect to the various networks, is increasing enormously. In 2019, as per one of the research reports, there were about 8.6 billion connected devices, which are likely to go up to 29.4 billion by 2023. So that itself increases the whole threat landscape and the attack surface that the attackers can go after. The data privacy and regulations are increasing again. Every country is coming up with their own data privacy regulations. Today, there are about 120 countries who are coming up with their own specific privacy laws and regulations in addition to whatever there have already been there. The increase of cloud adoption, as we've seen, the cloud adoption amongst the organizations and probably within your organizations also must be increasing quite a lot. That is public cloud, private cloud, multi-cloud environments. Again, the spend around that is increasing. As we see in 2020, it was about 371.4 billion, which is likely to go up to 832 billion by 2025. That itself tells us the story that how much dependency is coming onto cloud and how organizations are moving their data, applications, workloads onto these cloud environments. And these business models itself are evolving with a lot of ecosystem and partners coming in. Today, the supply chain or the value chain that the organizations operate in is growing day by day. There are a lot of vendors coming in, there are a lot of consumers coming in, and there is ecosystem which is growing exponentially. And these things are all adding to the attack surface, the threat landscape of the organizations. Again, there's a radical shift in the cybersecurity landscape also, which is fueling to rethink the cyber resilience. So if you look at the state of cyber risk, the increasing breach impact, the cost of breach impact itself has gone up from 4.2 to 4.35 million over the last few years. There is an increasing cyber attack every 11 seconds, right? So, and it takes about 197 days to detect and 69 days to just contain a cyber attack today. Every other day, our organizations where we are supporting our customers are constantly countering those cyber attacks, helping them working with those cyber attacks. The rising ransomware as a threat is continuously growing. Any ransomware attack today costs a minimum of $500,000 in order to recover or respond to that. And this is again growing. So the payment itself has climbed up by 82% in what organizations have to pay for recovering from a ransomware. The supply chain risks, as I talked about, the supply chains are increasingly growing with number of vendors, number of partners that were getting integrated into the organization. And that is also adding to the increased breaches that are happening. And then the privacy data regulations, as I talked about, right? Now, what are those primary drivers for this? Is essentially the explosion of devices. There are digital, cloud, IoT, OT enabled products, 5G, AI, quantum, all of these coming together, and we will see this growing year on year as we progress. The vulnerabilities are also increasing, and because of these explosion of technology, there are opportunities for the attackers to exploit those vulnerabilities around these various technologies and devices. In the last few years, we have seen the OT, IoT environments getting compromised quite heavily. The traditional IT environment has always been the target, but now they have more targets to go after. And these are something which are new, right? So today the manufacturing organizations are still learning how to integrate securely their OT environments, their IT environments, how to exchange the data. And that is again driving the whole cyber resiliency discussions that we are having. Phishing attacks, stolen RDP, brute force, the sophistication of these attacks is also growing exponentially. Every other day we see a new type of an attack, a new kind of a malware, or even the sophistication increasing. We have already seen this with how ChatGPT is helping these attackers to just define a malware or write a malware. But at the same time, there are services like ransomware as a service that is also available in the dark web, which can be used by these attackers to exploit and launch attacks. The software supply chain risk, MSSP and security vendors are equally getting targeted. So as we provide services to our customers and as they get to know how much information is pricey for those customers, we are seeing those attacks increasing across all the ecosystem. And then the lack of data localization strategy, tech limitation, there's a lot of legacy still continuing to be in the organizations and the environment, which is resulting into having the attacks getting exploited and allowing to enter into the networks. And this is causing a lot of cyber stress within the organizations, within the teams, the cyber security teams of the organizations as well. The numbers itself speak a lot. 20,000 plus vulnerabilities every year. It is increasing 10%. 2.7 million skill shortages. We are struggling with the skill shortage every other day. And still, we are not able to meet that. There is not enough skilled people to address the new and emerging threats as well. There are almost different steps of tools that organizations have implemented. So on an average, when we look at the organizations, there are about 45 plus different tools that the organizations deploy or invest into. But there is no real intelligence coming out of it. They are not integrated well to give that whole single pane of a glass view. The suppliers, any organizations today we talk, they have a minimum of 1,000 plus suppliers that they have to deal with. And this whole supply chain ecosystem is becoming a big risk today when we talk about, and that adds to the cyber resiliency kind of failure as well. And then the lack of visibility. As I said, while we put in technology, while we put in processes, while we put in people, there's a lack of visibility on what exactly is the nature of the attack that is happening or the nature of the protection that is there or detection that is there, which can give an integrated view to the organizations. So this is all fueling to rethink that how do we build this whole cyber resiliency framework within the organizations, because it's, as we have been saying, it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when that these things will happen and the organization will be attacked. Let's take a look at how the cyber threats have evolved over the years. Right? I think if you go back to 2004, there were very simple, similar viruses, worms, trojans that were coming in, and then the sophistication has kept on increasing over the years. We looked at identity theft, phishing happening, which continues to grow. There are then DNS attacks, botnet, anti-spam attacks, which went into the last decade. And since last decade until now, I think this rise has been very rapid. There have been social engineering attacks, there have been phishing farming attacks, browser exploitation, web injections, Bitcoin, ransomware, and now in the present stage where this carbon layer oriented attack and sophisticated AI-based attacks are actually adding to the more risks on the resiliency requirements of the organizations which we need to address today. There are also modern emerging cybersecurity threats that we see. Digital hunting is becoming a ground for all the bad actors and anti-government sentiments to go after the nations, not just the organizations, but are launching attacks on the nations, and that we have seen with the whole geopolitical scenarios that are developing. The cross-border laws are still not very effective, so an attack emerging from a certain country and if it gets exploited or successful, there's not much that any other country can do about it. So the threat actors itself are getting much more organized. They are also getting inside the organizations and launching those attacks through the insiders. And then obviously there are nation states launching information warfare, economic gain, espionage, all types of attacks. So the threat actors are becoming more and more sophisticated, learned, and more efficient. And the threat vectors are increasing. So that gives the threat actors a lot of food for thought on how to enter, how to exploit all these things. And that's what is the balance that we need to strike to and see how we can build a resilient organization. Some of these ideas, I think you must have seen these videos, but just to give a view of how deep fakes are being used as well. So, and these are led to misguide people. These are led to, take actions which may not be in the favor of the organizations. So some of these videos are actually giving a view of, if you've looked at the Ukrainian President Zelensky, his deepfake was created in order to ask his soldiers to surrender to Russia when the war started. Similarly, there was a President Obama's deepfake created by Jordan Peele to give messages, just to demonstrate how these deepfake videos using AI technologies can be used and leveraged across these organizations. Even some of these tools which are mentioned out here are used just by picking up images and changing the expressions and of the facial to create and videos and messaging around these things. And this again can be, while it is just a demonstrable today, it can still be used for launching attacks against organizations, or organizations can be misled into taking certain actions which may not be really in their favor. Some of the other attacks, browser in a browser, I think this is a very sophisticated attack that is happening today, wherein pages are created by these attackers which look very similar to the actual pages, and then they are asking for credentials to be entered into it. So it's actually a browser that opens up within the fake website, and then those users are asked to enter the credentials and they can't get out of it. And this again lets organizations at a weaker ground, wherein some of the users which are not really very aware, they're not really educated, and that's where the user awareness education comes into a picture, can easily be lured into entering their credentials, which will let the attacker know and how to get into the organizations. So what we do about it, right? How do we rethink cyber resilience as a topic? How do we look at it at a different lens? So in all, security, still we have to have the basic principles of confidentiality, integrity, availability that needs to be maintained. If it's more of an IT-driven organization, then it works like need to maintain the CIA in that sequence. If it's a manufacturing or a supply chain, then the availability part becomes more critical. So in either ways, the three pillars do not change. So we still need to look at how these three pillars needs to be addressed. And then we can't miss the people, process, technology aspect of it, right? Still, the cyber resiliency needs to be designed, evolved, and looked upon with the three aspects of people, process, and technology. And then there are the different elements that are coming in. We've been looking at security by design. How can security be embedded within the whole design fabric? How can applications be built securely right from the beginning? How the infrastructure can be designed right from beginning in a secure way? How do we bring in the governance layer on top of it to make sure that all these elements of people, process, technologies, and the CIA are addressed properly on an ongoing basis? What is the kind of assurance that organizations and the key stakeholders can give to their management, their shareholders and stakeholders, that whatever controls are being put in place are good enough, are strong enough? Defense in depth, going at each layer of the organization and looking at the data, applications, front end, back end. How does the defense in depth work, including the network side of it? And that's where the zero trust principle, which has been evolved in the past few years, comes into picture as well. That how do we make sure that it's not allow anybody to get into the network and have access, but how do we build that zero trust framework and zero trust principles into the whole organizational cyber resilience framework? And what really needs to be looked at is four things that we think are important, right? So one is shared mental models of resilience. The advanced defense technologies are available to us. The response and recovery capabilities need to be combined with these shared mental models. so that the incident readiness is done. Resiliency is all about how quickly we can respond to the incident, how quickly can we detect, how quickly can we contain, because it's all about making sure that the organization can stand up back again, and that's where this whole shared mental models of resilience need to be looked at. We also need to rethink resilience from a governance paradigm, that how can an ongoing continuous assurance can be provided, whether it is the design, security design, whether it is zero trust, whether it is effective control testing, and that can give assurance, and the security guys can have a view of what's happening in the environment. The board can sleep well that yes, the security has been taken care of, and then there is assurance that they get to see. And then there is the cyber security, which builds the whole competitive advantage, because that's what the organizations are looking at today. How can cyber security play a role in giving them the competitive advantage while they are putting up their retail business online, or whether the supply chain has been looked after properly, or even if as a partner, when they are going and doing business with some other organizations, can they give their own assurance to those organizations that yes, my organization is foolproof, there is cyber security in place, and then there will be no compromise happening through my organization into the partner organization. And then last and not the least is building trust with the stakeholders. How do we build trust within the customers, within the partners, within the affiliates, and the larger ecosystem? Are we good enough to share information about threats, about intelligence, about any attacks that they have already been noticed and notified across the ecosystem? Because it's not one organization detecting and then moving away and protecting, but can that organization in the value chain have that trust with the rest of the value chain and the partners, that yes, if I detect something, I can go ahead and tell the 10 other partners in that value chain that this is something wrong that I have been detecting, and please go ahead and make sure your organization is resilient as well. Now, in order to do all of this, we've come up with a resiliency framework as well. So what we look at it, how this resiliency framework can be adopted. There are several aspects to it. One, if you start from the core, is anticipate. We need to continuously anticipate what would go wrong with the organization, what could go wrong with the network, what could go wrong with the data, what could go wrong with the privacy, policy, governance, regulatory compliance. So there is a continuous anticipation that needs to be put in place, whether it is through the first line of defense, breach response mechanism and testing, cyber resilience assessments that needs to be carried out. Once that anticipation is done in a proper way, then we need to withstand that, right? Okay, these are my threat landscape, this is the attack surface. How can I withstand if anything goes wrong? Is there enough cyber hygiene in place? Are there continuous checks being done in and assurances being provided? Is there a model or a network controls that can protect anybody to come in and avoid these attacks to happen, and have a zero trust kind of a framework in place? Is there an intelligence SOC that can detect, monitor, and respond to these emerging attacks and withstand any kind of a attack that happens continuously? And then the aspect of recovery. How strong is the recovery mechanism in place? Whether we have the right incident management, whether we have the business continuity in place, whether we have cyber insurance in place for the areas that we cannot really take care of. So are those things in place and put in appropriate way? And then how do we evolve on an ongoing basis? Right? How does the risk management work? How do the innovative technology, adaptive security can be embedded into the whole framework? So these are the four key areas around which this whole cyber resiliency framework needs to be defined. Again, the attack surface resiliency also needs to be looked at. By that, what we mean is the environment that the whole organization is operating in. There are cloud environments, there is OT, IoT for certain organizations which come into picture. There is an identity element which is more critical. How do we identify the right users, the right stakeholders, the right people to come in and allow access to their applications and data? And then an on-prem and off-prem, right? An application and infrastructure layer that needs to be protected continuously. How do we make sure that these things are addressed through the resiliency framework? And then the supply chain, as we talked about, that how do the supply chain elements come together? And this kind of a framework gives an organization a starting point to look at, measure, and then implement various controls that can be deployed, which are mentioned in the outer box out there at each layer in order to make sure that they are cyber resilient and this resiliency framework can be successfully deployed. In order to do that, just to leave you with the final thoughts, we come up with a lot of different services that we have, part of TCS. We can help strengthen the cyber resilience with all our comprehensive cyber security services that we have, right from MDR, data protection, identity access management, cloud security, enterprise vulnerability management, supply chain security, IT/OT, governance, risk compliance. These are all the elements that needs to be addressed and fed back into the cybersecurity framework. We do have our booth out there. Please feel free to visit that and make sure you get more insights into how do we help organizations in building this whole cyber resiliency framework. So thank you very much. That was quite short and sweet that you wanted to. Anytime, any questions? Yeah.
Hi, Kunal. Thanks for the presentation. You referred to the supply chain risks. Increasingly, supply chains are becoming non-linear. What I mean is, because of the digital technology adoption, it's quite networked. Do you see that being an enhanced threat to cyber resilience, and how do you address it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is causing a lot of today. Every discussion we are having with the customers or our organizations is around supply chain and how do we protect the supply chain, because it is, as you said, right, it is becoming non-linear. We don't know what kind of measures those any vendor or any partner in that supply chain is having in their organizations in order to protect their own company from having a cyber attack. And that is leading to a lot of loopholes or a lot of gaps that can then further proliferate into the rest of the supply chain. And that's why those increasing threat landscape is becoming more and more critical for organizations to look at and address that. It's very complicated today because they're doing the assessments, going back and checking what controls they have in place, what frameworks they have in place is not very easy. Some of those supply chain partners are also very old, right? They have been running their legacy systems of providing services, and they are not really matured with the level of investments that needs to go in order to have the right level of people, process, technology. So that's one of the increased factor.
Just on the supply chain again, I think you had a statistic in one of your slides. You suggested there's 98%. Sorry, 98% of people had some kind of breach within their supply chain. I just wondered if you had any more context around that. It seems quite a high figure.
Yeah. So what we mean is, if like we have vendors today who are just providing, say, for example, an application support or an application hosting or data hosting kind of services. What we have seen is because they have not patched their systems or environments, or they have not done their testing in a timely manner or in a rigorous way, the environments that are compromised at the supply chain value, if any of the vendor it could be, and that is leading to an attack or a disruption happening for the main parent organization which is using their services. And this is something which we are seeing is continuously growing. So it is important that if I'm outsourcing a particular service, and it could be anything today, right? It could be just some facility management services who are providing service to you. Through a social engineering or a phishing attack happening, somebody can compromise and get into your environment and still have an attack carried out. And these are the things which are increasing. Earlier, it was more of just getting into an application and a system, but now they know the wider supply chain. And as you saw, there are minimum 1,000+ suppliers that any organizations today have on their books. So it's becoming very easy for the attackers to get in.
How mature do you think companies are? How mature do you think companies are in that area of cyber assurance for your third-party suppliers? I know that's a challenge for us that we're looking to improve on, but I wonder if you had anything generic to say.
So when you say mature, as in how much of organizations are subscribing or getting the cyber insurance or assurance?
No,
or is it
cyber assurance of third-party suppliers.
I think they're still struggling. because and it's only because of the sheer number of volume of suppliers that they have. So even if I have to put it on a scale of say 1 to 5, today we still see they are somewhere around 1.5 to 2, because they can't really make out how their supply chain is structured, right? Which vendors are critical, which vendors can bring down their systems down if something wrong happens, what can affect their whole business, right? And that is the main part. How do we categorize the vendors within high, medium, low criticality, and then go after the highest impact vendor, not necessarily the highest vendor to whom you are paying money, but it could be a vendor who is not so expensive but still has a very high impact on the ecosystem altogether. So that categorization needs to be done properly, and that's where organizations are struggling. Yes. That how do we categorize these vendors and how do we prioritize the assurance to be taken from those vendors? The other aspect is the vendors itself, right? The vendors themselves are not very mature to respond to what you're asking for them, because they don't have that understanding. They don't know what questions are being sent to them. They don't know what kind of controls they need to look at. So at times we are also working with organizations where we actually do that on behalf of them. We go to the vendors, we sit down with them, we make them understand that this is what we're looking at, this is the impact, and that's how we are helping the organizations to mature. But it is still low, but the realization is increasing. So hopefully in the next 3-4 years, you would see that the maturity grows.
Thank you.
Just wait for the microphone. Sorry, go ahead. Just waiting for the microphone so we can hear you on the video.
Follow-up question. You mentioned in passing about the use of AI and ChatGPT for generating malware and so on. Have you seen the converse? Is AI, and to what extent is it being used to anticipate threats, and how is that being applied?
Yes, so AI is definitely been used to anticipate threat as well. And in fact, there are certain use cases that are now being developed through AI in order to build secure websites, in order to build secure networks. So where the AI may not necessarily give a whole complete detailed guideline, but at least it sets the principles that these are the things to be looked into, and these are the things how you need to structure when you're building a secure network or building a website. It's also been used in monitoring, detection, and response. A lot of AI mechanisms are now built into the solutions as well that are deployed at the organization level. So they are helping automate the response. It may not be very sophisticated response of completely containing the attack, but at least detecting and stopping it to a certain level where then the manual effort can come into place and they can start doing the forensics, further analysis in order to discover and identify what goes wrong. So that automation is also increasing through these AI elements that we are seeing today. I hope it was interesting and insightful. I think we're 5 minutes ahead of time. Do visit. My colleagues are